I've managed to hire a smuggler to help you out. He'll be... Oh, I see we're in position. Good luck!
Hello again, I am Blunty, and I've been thinking about Nintendo Switch 2 Edition updates. So my broader question for you during this video is, what original Switch 1 games would you like to see, or do you think deserve, rather more to the point, a second chance in the spotlight with some sort of update or edition patch for the Nintendo Switch 2? So, we already know the Switch 2 is backwards compatible with the vast majority of Switch 1 games. There's a small pocket of exceptions, but for the most part, it should work pretty seamlessly, and it does this in an unexpectedly clever way, which I have broken down in another video if you're curious. But it's not just ordinary backwards compatibility, and it's not emulation. But aside from just running Switch 1 games, the extra performance overhead that Switch 2 has should enable a lot of existing Switch 1 games with problematic performance issues to at least run a little smoother, even without special patches, and have their load times be faster as a nice bonus because of the vastly snappier storage on the Switch 2. But some games will even have free updates to specifically unleash them a little for Switch 2. So for that kind of thing, we might see better resolution scaling, or at least high-resolution targets, and unlocked frame rates, or simply just plain old 60 FPS modes in games that were locked at 30 FPS. We already know of a dozen such free update patches. But then we also have the so-called Switch 2 Edition updates for a few select games. These new patches and updates will be paid, although if you are a subscriber to the Nintendo Online service, you will get access to these for free, for as long as you stay a subscriber. At least specifically the Nintendo first-party ones. Third parties are a different issue. And much like we saw with a fistful of titles when the PS4 to PS5 transition was happening, they will update the game itself to take fuller advantage of the Switch 2's extra performance and capabilities. This will take a few forms, but in general we can expect higher native resolutions, better frame rates of course, maybe even texture updates for high-resolution base textures, possibly updates to include the new control methods like support for the Switch 2's Joy-Con mouse mode, improved draw distances, better LOD pop-in, all that kind of stuff. Think of it as adding an ultra graphics mode to a PC game where you've been playing it medium the whole time. Some of them even come with brand new content, actual DLC made bespoke for the power of the new console. We know of 11 such updates so far, but we will absolutely see more as time rolls on, and as more and more developers actually get development hardware for the Switch 2, which apparently is a bit of an issue right now. The Switch 1 has an extensive and broad library of games, and more than a few of them could benefit big time with these kinds of free and paid updates. I don't think a lot of devs will spend much time and effort on bespoke Switch 2 Edition style patches for a lot of games, because that is potentially a lot of person hours and money to be spent, but it's not hard to imagine that games with still active player bases, or decent ongoing sales still, or indeed with sequels on the way especially, they will likely see at least a free patch for Switch 2 to make them run better, present better, and invite both new players and existing owners to give them a replay during the pre-launch hype and marketing for the sequel. Like The Outer Worlds here, which is the game you've been seeing if you don't recognize it instantly, it has a sequel coming sometime this year, and I'm personally very excited about that. And in fact, there's a special Xbox Direct showcase all about it in just a few days after the Switch 2 launches. That timing might be a coincidence, it might not. But I've been showing you the Switch 1 version of The Outer Worlds compared to the PC version, and as you can see, the Switch version is rough looking. It originally released for the PlayStation 4, PC, and Xbox One in October 2019, with the Nintendo Switch port released in June 2020. And while the Switch version plays, let's call it fine now, at launch it was a miserable disaster. It looked even worse than this, with even muddier textures and texture loading issues and massive performance hitches and full-on freezes as you just walked around. It was basically unplayable in its launch form, which I was really disappointed about, angry about frankly, because this game grabbed me when I got it at launch on PC. So having a portable version of an RPG like this was just so very enticing. This was, of course, before we had the likes of the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck and such. But The Outer Worlds comes from Obsidian Entertainment and was of particular interest to many RPG fans, as the people leading its development were the same people responsible for the richly praised Fallout New Vegas. But it was also what we used to call a AA game, a term we don't really use much anymore for whatever reason. You know, AAA, AA, that kind of thing. It had decent backing, but the team who made it was never more than 75 people, so it was always a relatively small project by comparison to many other such RPGs. But just before the game actually released, Microsoft acquired Obsidian Entertainment itself. So the sequel is coming out of the home of Xbox. But the original game was awesome. To this day, it stands as the only RPG of this type that once I finished my initial playthrough, immediately started another playthrough. I'm no stranger to replaying my favorite RPGs, we all do it, I'm sure, but there's usually months or years between replays. That's how strongly this one hit me. I wanted to immediately experience it again and make some different choices. But when I got the Switch version, I couldn't even finish a single playthrough. The port was just so bad. Even now, after patches have significantly improved it and made it at least run properly and improved the graphics, made the textures load properly and solved that hitching problem, it still doesn't feel right. And it's, well, frankly, difficult to look at sometimes. But with the sequel looming, and we don't yet know if The Outer Worlds 2 will have a Switch 2 version at this point. Like I said, the timing of the directs is probably a coincidence, maybe not though. But considering Microsoft seem pretty eager to strongly support the Switch 2 console, it is a fair chance I think it gets a Switch 2 port. But in any case, with a sequel on the way, I'm hoping that a small team has been tinkering away on a Switch 2 update for it, or better yet, a Switch 2 edition patch for it. So anyone who didn't play it yet, but is enticed by the sequel, and who does want to give the original a go before the sequel arrives, can do so on the Switch 2, and not get kind of a poor impression of what this game, and now series, can be. And sure, let me be clear about this. The strength of this title, the reason I loved it so much, lies more in the characters, the stories, and the world building much more than it does any of the action, combat, or shooting or whatever. And all of that still comes through even in the muddiness of the Switch version. It'd still be nice though, and I think pretty smart, if Obsidian did give it a kick up the bum for Switch 2, so anyone re-experiencing it on Switch, or indeed choosing to experience for the first time on Switch 2, can get a much better impression. Speaking personally, I am literally just about to start another playthrough of this game to freshen my memories up of it and sink in one more time before the sequel arrives. Also going to be streaming it as a live playthrough over on Twitch. And unless I get an invite for the Dune beta that's happening this weekend, that's what I'm going to be streaming this weekend. But I had intended to do that playthrough on the Switch version, to give it one more go after all the patching has taped up the horrific state of things I experienced at its launch on Switch. And as a kind of simultaneous farewell to the Switch itself, the last game I play through on the Switch before the Switch 2 launches. But, yeah, as I went back to it to see how it felt now, to prepare for the streams and whatnot, I still just can't. It's still too rough feeling, too muddy, too jarring. If this is my farewell tour of this game before the sequel, this experience level is almost insulting to it, I feel. So I'll be playing on PC. But let's be clear, it's not like it's the most amazing looking game even maxed out on PC. It still has issues with LED pop-in and odd lighting at times, but when it does all come together, it still does look pretty awesome. But again, the strength of the game isn't in how it looks, or in the combat even. It's the characters and story and world building and frequently hilariously dark humor. All the things that made people praise New Vegas for. Unsurprisingly, seeing as it is written by the same pair of blokes. So it's not so much about it looking the best, and shiny and pretty and crisp and whatnot. It's more about it not looking or feeling distracting in its presentation. And that's what the problem is on the Switch 1. Its presentation is distracting. It's detrimental to the overall experience. Which is why I really, really hope it gets a Switch 2 update. And better than that, an edition style update with significant improvements to textures and performance at the least. And it's not the only game I'd hope that for. Pokemon Legends Arceus, for some reason, no news of an update or edition update for that, despite Pokemon Violet and Scarlet confirmed to have them. That's pretty annoying, personally speaking, because I think Legends Arceus is a far better game in my opinion. And there is a new Pokemon Legends game coming out at the end of the year. So, why? Why is Legends Arceus left out in the cold? Hey, Game Freak, Nintendo? Oi! I can easily imagine Hello Games goosing up No Man's Sky. They have supported that game just spectacularly well throughout the years. It seems obvious that's going to get a Switch 2 update. The reason we haven't heard about it yet? Probably because they haven't got access to a dev unit yet. Because, like I said, that apparently is a bit of a problem for a lot of devs. Minecraft is another obvious one, but we've not heard about it yet. Again, on my personal wish list, Dragon Quest Builders 1 and 2, I think deserve at least a frame rate unlock. Those games are desperately underrated. Monster Hunter Rise and Sunbreak, of course. Unlock the frame rate, target high resolutions. Wouldn't be shocked if Skyrim Switch version got something too, even more so now that Bethesda is under Microsoft's roof. Jeez, just give me an FOV slider alone on Skyrim on Switch and it's better. Just that the massively restricted field of view in that game is one of the reasons I just can't play that damn game on the Switch. Literally makes me motion sick. But what about you? What Switch games do you think really deserve a fresh injection of cleanup and lubrication so they can live fresh lives in their best lights on Switch 2? What games with sequels coming down the track do you think deserve that? What games do you just keep going back to again and again and again over the years do you think deserve that kind of playthrough? Or what games that, continually tick along in the background do you think deserve that attention so you can enjoy them to their fullest on the Switch 2? Oh, hey, what about Hyrule Warriors, actually, while I think of it? It wasn't in my notes, just occurred to me. Age of Calamity, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. I got that game, and it was just unplayably shitty in its performance. Like, I literally just can't play it because it runs so badly. It has a sequel on its way, or a prequel, I guess, or whatever. There's another Hyrule Warriors thing coming for the Switch 2. So maybe it will get a clean up as well, so it won't choke to death on its own choppy frame rate and be miserable to play. Anyway, thanks for watching. I am Blunty. Think as always to the patrons scrolling right above there. And I will catch you next time. And yeah, pop along to the streams and revisit Outer Worlds with me one more time.